I'm going to turn it over to our guest speaker. You may have recognized that we share the same last name. Emily is our one and only daughter. So, you know, as they say, we stopped at perfection. So I'll leave it at that. And Emily is known to several folks here, but she's just returned back to Port Angeles after being gone for 7 years, devoting all that time to her education. And I'll let her take it from there.
All righty. So just turn your volume off. Okay. Okay. Can everybody hear me on Zoom and in here? I'll try to project. Okay. So my name is Emily. I'm Ellen's daughter. And I am here to kind of talk today about immigration in the United States, a little bit of history about how we got to where we are now, who is impacted by our laws and policies around immigration, and how can we go forward with the current administration. So, let's see. Did some of this working earlier? So I was born and raised in Port Angeles and graduated from Port Angeles High School in 2018. Then I went to Spokane to go to Gonzaga University for my undergraduate degree. I studied biology, and then I earned a minor in political science as well. And then I went back just this past year and I got a master's degree so that I could become a teacher. So I'm maybe going to be teaching here next school year. We'll see if it's like substituting or if I'll be full-time. But I do have my certificate now, which is exciting. And yeah. And so I'm going to be sharing about some service work and educational trips that I did while I was a student at Gonzaga through this program called Justice in January. And I might refer to it with the acronym of JIJ instead to just like consolidate. But it is a year-long immersion program that includes a 1-credit course where we prepare for our trip by learning about the history, the cultural context of our southern border. And then we have a 1-week immersion trip in January where students travel to various sites along the southern border and then travel throughout those days and meet with different community groups, organizations, and migrants themselves on both sides of the border to hear stories about kind of what this process looks like in real time. And then we would be tasked with coming up with some kind of group advocacy project or educational project for our peers or for the community when we came back from our trip. So I went once as a regular like student volunteer, and then the second time I went as a leader, which is not really important other than it just meant that the second time I didn't really have much choice in what site that I went to. And so I ended up getting to go to 2 different locations, which was very cool. So kind of the goals for my presentation today and our collective goals together would be that we leave here with a better understanding of the complexity of our country's immigration history. So that's looking at policy, foreign policy, all the factors in play. We feel better prepared to have conversations with friends, colleagues, family members, and policymakers about immigration reform. And in those conversations, we are able to center stories or experiences that are being lived by migrants in the United States and Mexico and elsewhere in the world. And then we will have a list of concrete action items and an idea for how we want to get involved. I had paper copies that I gave to, I think, everybody in the room now. For those of you on Zoom, I will get a PDF file sent to you all after the meeting, but it's just a consolidate, it's just exactly a copy of what's on my final slides for the presentation so that you can take it home and do with this list what you will. Yeah, okay. So how we're kind of going to go about this, we're going to talk first about the history. How did we get here? Then I'm going to share some stories from my service trips about some of the people that I got to meet with that are impacted by these issues. And then we're going to talk together about what we can do now going forward. So first I put this little side note in here because in this presentation, will be doing my best to use two different but similarly sounding words intentionally because they mean different things. So I will be referring to people crossing the border as migrants rather than immigrants more often than not, because migration is a natural process that occurs across many species, including the human species. Pre-colonization in the United States, indigenous peoples migrated across their ancestral lands following seasons, following hunting patterns. So now immigration is this human imposed set of laws and regulations that disturb that natural flow. So I'm just wanting to point out this difference in language that I think it might seem like a really minuscule minor thing, but I think it's really important because it's kind of helps us all remember that this is not a new problem. This is not a strictly legal problem. This is a natural human instinct to migrate to meet your needs. And many other species do that as well. So, okay, getting into the history. This is going to be very brief because the history of United States immigration in and of itself could probably be like a 4-hour long talk. And there's so much more that I have to learn about this as well, but I'm kind of trying to give us like a shared understanding to move forward with. So prior to the 1850s, much of the Southwest United States was not even United States land. It belonged to Mexico. And then in 1948, we had the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo that ceded that land to the United States. So prior to the 1850s, the United States didn't even have a lot of this area. We didn't have California, we didn't have Arizona, New Mexico, Texas. Then in 1850, slavery was still legal in the South. There were bounties essentially on escaped slaves that allowed people then these like vigilante bounty hunters essentially to go out and take it upon themselves to look for slaves, round them up, turn them in, and then collect the reward. This is relevant to immigration because after this land became United States land, now we have all these Southerners that are wanting to go out and explore the land and try to capture escaped slaves. So this is the first time we see like any kind of enforcement of border, the southern border, and it's very informal. This is no like government agency or anything. These are genuinely like bounty hunters. Then jumping forward a couple decades, in 1882, we have the Chinese Exclusion Act, which is the first time the United States ever legislates who is allowed to enter and who isn't. And I think this is interesting to point out because when we're looking at the whole broad history of immigration, it's important to know that not all migrants who may be welcome now would have been welcomed all the time. There was a period in United States history where we were open to accepting migrants from essentially all parts of the world. And then that started to change, and it started to change with Chinese people. And it impacted our southern border because as the restrictions became more intense, um, very similar to what we're seeing now, people become more desperate to try to cross through other avenues, and that meant through Canada or Mexico at the time. So we start to see strengthening of both the northern and southern border because of this fear of illegal Chinese immigrants entering the country. Then 10 years later, in 1892, Ellis Island opens in New York City. It's a very well-known, prominent part of our history. It's where the Statue of Liberty stands, and it was the United States' first major immigration station. Between 1892 and 1954, we had more than 12 million people migrate through Ellis Island. And that number peaked in 1907 with 1.3 million in just that 1 year, which is a pretty significant amount of people. Then in 1910, the Mexican Revolution was fueling now this growing fear of migrants entering from Mexico, Mexican migrants specifically entering from Mexico. So this is where the United States starts to actually take action and arm some people to go and protect and defend the southern border. So we have US armed forces on the southern border. We also have this militia that was known as the Texas Rangers. And again, we have these vigilante people who are taking it upon themselves to take justice into their own hands. These people were known as home guards, and began to guard the border. And so they didn't have any formal power, but the governor of Texas at that point kind of informally allowed them to do whatever they wanted as long as they were enforcing justice. Okay, so now, almost exactly 100 years ago, the United States Border Patrol is officially established. So they just celebrated their 100th birthday. This is a federally armed force that is specifically dedicated to policing the border all year round. I think it's interesting to point out this is like directly on the Border Patrol's the history part of their website. So it's not a very contested piece of their history at all, that officers were more concerned with the flow of illegal substances during Prohibition and were trying to curtail alcohol coming in through Mexico and Canada rather than the flow of illegal people. And I just think that's kind of an interesting difference than what we're kind of seeing today, where a lot of the conversation is about a flow of illegal substances, but a lot of the action that's being taken is against people and not the substances themselves. Okay, now border infrastructure building starts to begin. In the 1940s, we had this department of our government that doesn't exist under this name anymore, the U.S. Immigration and Naturalization Service, that started to build actual fencing along the southern border. So they were building just chain link barriers. And then in 1978, the United States Congress passed a $4.3 million funding request to build and reinforce the larger border wall. Okay, this is the last history slide. So we're going to talk a little bit about the Clinton administration, because I think as Democrats, it's important for us to remember that there have been times in our party's history where our leaders maybe have made mistakes in some areas. And we have to be honest about that, and so that we can honestly move forward from those mistakes and not try to hide from them or run from them. So the Clinton administration made one of their priorities strengthening the southern border to curb the flow of illegal substances. So there were these three like state operations that all have individual names, and they all had specific different jobs, and I don't really know much about them individually. So we have Operations Gatekeeper, Hold the Line, and Safeguard that were in California, Texas, and Arizona, respectively. All together, I know that they work together to help just strengthen border security, expand Border Patrol budget, expand the amount of Border Patrol officers that we had, things like that. We also, President Clinton signed the Illegal Immigration Reform and Immigrant Responsibility Act of 1996, which essentially made it really, really, really difficult for somebody who ever crossed illegally to have any pathway to citizenship in the future. It put like a 10-year timeline on that, which may not seem like a big deal, but when you're talking about like parents, and things like that, like that's a long time to be separated potentially from your family, from your children. So, and then Donald Trump, our current president. So I don't want to spend a ton of time talking about him because I think that we're all pretty familiar with his stance on immigration. But I just want to kind of point out like his main idea. So he's made these promises to build the wall and protect the American people against invasion, and additionally has spread these harmful lies that portray migrants from coming through the southern border as violent, dangerous criminals that we should all be afraid of and protect ourselves from. But it is important for us to know and understand that much of the wall was constructed long before Donald Trump was ever in office. And the photos of the wall that I will have in this presentation were not built during Donald Trump's presidency. So while he's certainly been promising to expand and strengthen the wall is there. It's not Donald Trump's wall. It was there before him and it will be there after him. And we're not being invaded by Mexico or anywhere else. So it's just not, they're just lies and not true. And we'll leave it at that. Okay, so I'll start by talking about some stories from my first trip, which was to San Diego and Tijuana in January of 2020, right before the COVID outbreak. One of the places that we got to visit was called Casa Cornelia Law Center. It was a pro bono legal office that provided services for migrants who had active or open like asylum cases, who were trying to maintain or regain custody of their children, who had been deported and were trying to fight against their deportation. And so in that conversation, we had been learning that in order to legally seek asylum, migrants have to do so on US soil. So their options for legally seeking asylum are they have to come to a point of entry along the US border and turn themselves in to Border Patrol and hope that Border Patrol agent will do the right thing and process them through the correct channels and actually file them for asylum. Or they have to choose to try to enter illegally by crossing the desert or whatever. There's many means and methods that people choose to do that. So the question that I had asked these lawyers or attorneys was, I had the chance to travel out of the country a few times, and I know usually customs agents will ask you a few questions like, where are you planning on staying? How long are you planning on staying? What are you going to be doing while you're here? You know, you answer those questions, but it's not like they ever check, or like I've never been asked, can I see your hotel reservation, or can I see your airline ticket home, or whatever. It's like, so as far as I'm thinking, I'm like, how do they have any way of knowing how long I'm planning to stay there? So I was thinking of this hypothetical scenario of, why can't a family from Mexico with the two parents load their two children in their car and drive through the San Diego Tijuana border port and say they're coming in to take their kids to Disneyland for the day, and once they cross the border, actually get their butt right to the nearest legal office and start filing for asylum. Why isn't that happening? And I was told that, well, they're not allowed. If they want to come take their kids to Disneyland, they need a visa. Nobody from Mexico or Latin American or Central American countries are permitted to enter the United States without a visa already. They can't come with just their country's passport. That doesn't exist for other countries in the world, or we don't have that same standard for, say, Canada, countries in the EU, and other countries don't have that same standard for American citizens. Mexico, for example, doesn't have that same standard for American visitors. So it's very clearly unfair. To me, I felt like it was very clear, like, okay, we are cutting off this part of the world. We don't want these people coming to our country. When we actually crossed the border, so that was a legal office that was in San Diego in the United States. When we crossed into Tijuana, Mexico, we had the opportunity to serve dinner and then have dinner at a local shelter called Casa del Migrante with some migrants, and chat with them kind of about their experiences just for that one night. So that shelter provided housing, resources for families for up to 1 month to help them relocate or re-find their footing, because the Remain in Mexico order means that all people who are seeking asylum or seeking legal entry have to go back to Mexico, which is creating a really severe overpopulation in cities like Tijuana, Nogales, these border cities in Mexico. So this shelter has to have that 1 month stipulation, otherwise they would always be overflowing. It would be impossible for them to run otherwise. But many of the people that we spoke to in this shelter happened to be fathers that were primarily alone. And were trying to provide for their families who were either elsewhere in Mexico or elsewhere in Central or South America, or families who were already in the United States. So one man that I got to speak to in particular had been already living in the United States with his family for over 32 years before he was deported. He has a wife and 3 children who are all living in Los Angeles that he's trying to provide for financially. He is, at the time of me speaking to him, he was in Tijuana staying at this shelter. He was working 10-hour days every day, and he was making $28 a day in Tijuana to send back to his family. So it was just completely unsustainable. He was not able to earn a livable wage in Mexico. He was working full time, doing his best, but he couldn't even, I mean, that's not even enough to support one person. And so in that conversation, he had told us that he planned to cross again. And of course, we don't know what that means for him. Of course, I think all hope that he made it safely, but made it back to his family. But this is just one story. Many people have stories like this, of being separated from family, and the only goal is to be able to provide for their family and not being able to do that. This is kind of, I mean, this is very upsetting. This section of the San Diego Tijuana trip. These were 2 organizations that shared an office in Tijuana, the Deported Veterans Support House and the Deported Mothers Support House. So just by the titles of those, it's like, what are we doing? It's disturbing that we are the reason that those organizations have to exist. But Hector Barajas was the man who founded, was and is the man who founded the Deported Veterans Support House. He was in the United States Army. He served from 1995 to 2001, and then was deported back to Mexico in 2006. He has been in Mexico ever since. in 2013, he founded this organization, the Deported Veterans Support House, to help other people, other veterans in situations just like his, who had come to the United States as children or as young adults and chose to enter military, the service, and served in the military, and then offered no pathway toward legal citizenship upon their exit of the military, regardless of what their discharge status was. So it was not even a, if you got a dishonorable discharge, you don't earn your citizenship. It doesn't matter if you, what medals you earned, what rank you earned, there's no pathway to citizenship for our service members. This building is also home to the Deported Mothers Support House, where we met with Yolanda, who is the founder. She is one of many women who are in situations where they came to the United States, brought their young children. President Obama, under the DACA Dreamers Act, those young children were able to gain legal citizenship, but those mothers potentially weren't. In many of those cases, as long as custody, the mothers are able to maintain custody over the children, the children can often request for their parents to earn citizenship as dreamers, and that can help expedite the process. But there's a big if there, because depending on the children's age, CPS has the tendency to say, oh, they need to get put into foster care, or they need to get put into the care of another family member, and not even really give families the chance to work toward legal citizenship before deporting the mothers. So at the time that Yolanda spoke with our group, she had been separated from her children for 15 years. And also at the time of our speaking, only 2 of their cases had been successful in reuniting families and granting mothers that citizenship. So it just really shows how much the odds are not stacked in the favor of migrants. Okay, Nogales, Nogales. So this Nogales, Mexico, and Nogales, United States, are right next to each other. And they really truly are, and it was one city that was separated by the border and by the enforcement of that border. So despite this separation, even 100 years after the implementation of the US Border Patrol, this city still maintains this international identity that I think is really beautiful. We got to visit, or like stop by, a bar that prior to the more strict enforcement of the border was kind of like a perfect picture of what like coexistence, a coexistent utopia could be like, where they were open to, and because of their placement, could serve patrons from both the United States and from Mexico, which encouraged those patrons to mix and mingle and build this kind of cross-border international community. There's in Nogales, there are pedestrian crossings as well as vehicle crossings, and they see nearly 3 million pedestrian crossings alone every year, because people are traveling to work, to get medical care, to buy medicine, to visit family. It really is this like community that is desperately trying to stick together across this border. So in talking about that, this was an incident in 2012 that really threatened to tear this community apart. that involved a 16-year-old boy, Jose Antonio Elena Rodriguez, who was a Nogales, who lived in Nogales. He lived in Mexico. And he was shot and killed by United States Border Patrol agents about 4 blocks from his home. The story of the incident is that these Border Patrol agents were in pursuit of individuals who were trying to cross the fence, scale the wall fence back into Mexico. And as the story goes, apparently at some point, these Border Patrol agents say that rocks were being thrown from the Nogales, Mexico side of the border to the United States side of the border. So naturally, Border Patrol agent response is to open fire 14 to 30 times across the border, just blindly. This was at night, so it was dark as well. And this young man was shot 10 times, mostly in his back. There's really nobody knows really if there were rocks being thrown, if it was Jose Antonio who was throwing the rocks. But regardless, this boy was shot and killed, and no justice. There was no penalty for that agent. It was basically deemed that it was like no man's land because he was shot across the border. There was really no jurisdiction. Nobody could do anything. It's a terribly sad story. So that photo is a photo of the memorial, like that's very near the site where he was killed, and you can see the wall in the background. And yeah, it's disturbing. But somehow we visited this site almost exactly 10 years after this incident, and this community was still together somehow, which is amazing. Okay, so back to what I said kind of at the beginning of the presentation, where I was sharing about how prior to colonization, indigenous peoples across the world and across North America migrated. And so their ancestral lands were and are much larger than their reservation lands. And I think many of us know that. So we had the opportunity to be invited to be guests to visit the Tohono O'odham Nation in Arizona. You can see the map of their reservation lands here. It's all the colored in areas. They have different like precincts or sections of their nation because it's geographically so large. This is the US-Mexico border. So all of the reservation land is in the United States. But their ancestral territory stretched across the border. It was known as essentially the entirety of the Sonora Desert, which is this giant desert in Arizona and Mexico. Nearly 3 million acres of land. So they tribal members of this nation in particular, this photo, if you can kind of, well, you could see this big tire here. This is a gate along the border wall. This fence is the border wall. So we don't have the 30-foot tall fence across the entirety of our border. We have it in places like San Diego, El Paso, Texas, Tucson, but more rural areas, they have more kind of livestock barriers or barbed wire type things, vehicle barriers. But the Tohono O'odham Nation has special border crossings that their tribal people are allowed to use to kind of bypass the border patrol red tape to be able to visit their ancestral lands and take care of what they need to, which is it's very unique and very special. But talking about that area, the desert is a very deadly place. And our border wall has been intentionally built with this in mind. So there were in 2022, almost 700 documented deaths and disappearances, and over 300 of those were linked to casualties in the desert, often due to dehydration, extreme temperatures, and things like that. But because recovering people, identifying individuals, especially when it comes to next of kin being across the border, it's really hard to get a concrete, accurate number of how many people are actually dying. We know it's hundreds, and we know it's too many. And we know that the border wall was intentionally built to funnel people through the most dangerous geography, with the intention of being a deterrent, but it doesn't work that way, because when people are truly desperate, they are desperate and they will take desperate measures. And so when it's a life and death situation and somebody has to choose to try to save their family and escape gang violence, and their only option is to try to cross through the desert where the fencing is more manageable and the Border Patrol agents are more scarce, that's more often what they will try to choose. And unfortunately, that leads to a lot of unnecessary deaths. Okay, so I'm pretty much done. This is where I'm going to start kind of just going over the, like, what's in the little handout that everybody got, so you know what you have. So these first two under the action items are organizations in Washington and the Pacific Northwest that are working to provide migrants with legal services and on legal advocacy. So the Northwest Immigrant Rights Project is like direct legal services. And so if you want to get involved or support them, especially if you are bilingual or know somebody who has any Spanish speaking abilities and would be willing to volunteer, that is their priority. They need bilingual volunteers, or lawyers if you know a bilingual lawyer. And then the Washington Immigrant Solidarity Network has several cool things. So first, they have a policy agenda that they put out every year that I highly recommend that we as a local party look at and incorporate into our policy agendas in the future. And they also have a deportation defense hotline that runs Monday through Friday from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. that you can call to report any immigration, ICE activity. So I would maybe put that phone number in your cell phone, or somewhere where you could easily find it. That just gives you something. If you see something, you have somebody to call to say something. And they also offer organizational membership. They don't offer individual membership at this time, but if we wanted to, as a local party, seek organizational membership with them, we could. Okay, if you feel like you want to donate your money or you're feeling super generous in that area, I have three ideas for places that I think that could be really good. First being the Florence Project. They provide pro bono legal services to migrants along the southern border. So the Northwest Immigrant Rights Project also is doing the same work, but they're providing those services for migrants in the Northwest. And the Florence Project is providing those services to migrants who are under the Remain in Mexico, who have been kind of deported. So I kind of just put these in order of priority, where I was just thinking Of course, donate to everybody if you feel like you can and want to. But if you're wanting to like get the most bang for your buck, I guess I put these under monetary support because they're like directly helping migrants in Mexico and in the southern border. KBI, the Kino Border Initiative, is another organization that works across the border, but they provide like direct aid services. So they are helping feed people, clothe people, keep them sheltered, provide childcare, help them find jobs while they're in Mexico, while they're being made to remain in Mexico and seek asylum. It's a really great organization. You can visit their website, donate. You can also, if you're planning a trip to the southern border, KBI and Esperanza International both are always taking volunteers, or if you know a church or a school group that needs a service trip or something to do, or another community group, these are really great organizations to look into. Esperanza works in housing, so they are working in Tijuana to build sustainable housing and strengthen their communities in Tijuana to try to reduce the need for people to leave as urgently. So they, yeah, and they're really fabulous. Esperanza, we got to stay with them. I would love to go back to Esperanza specifically. I highly recommend looking at their website. They're really great. And then I just have 3 documentaries listed that you can find either online on streaming services, or you can rent them online. This last one, We the People Ride, is not available yet, but they had a showing of it in Squem a few weeks ago that Mom and I went to, and it was fabulous. They're taking donations on their website to finalize the production of this documentary and make it more widely available. So that's another great place to donate if you feel able to. So just to wrap things up, because I threw like a lot at us, I had these questions, and you guys don't have to like call and respond. So if it's totally up to you. If you would rather just like talk to somebody near you about one of these questions, like something that surprised you or shocked you, something that you feel motivated to do now just to kind of process it. So we don't have to share out unless anybody wants to has something they really want to say.
And online, if they raise their hand too,
Oh,
just
yeah.
make sure to say that.
Okay, yeah. And if you're online, if you want to raise your hand,
Always.
we'll get you. Yeah.
I would say something that shocked me was actually the military, the people that served and they're sent back.
Yeah.
That's just shocking.
I know. It's so exploitative, right? Like we are willing to let these people risk their lives and their physical safety, and their like and everything, their whole selves for us, and then we are not offering them anything in return. It's crazy.
We've got a hand online. I've got to join the audio. Let's see. Yeah. Liz Baumgartner online, go ahead. I'll turn mine down. Go ahead. Liz, or what I'm doing. Okay. Here's on. I've got to mute. Sorry.
Okay. Liz, can you ask your question? Can you unmute? Or do you have to? Oh my gosh.
No, I'm turned off.
Sorry, no, that's me. I don't know how to make that stop. I think she needs to, here we go. She can't unmute herself. This is what I was afraid
Yeah.
of. Liz, I can't hear you.
Liz, you have to unmute.
I can't, she can't unmute
Yes,
because
she
we
did.
changed
Yes,
it.
she did. I think she can. I didn't.
I think I just unmuted.
There.
Oh.
Go.
I don't know why it showed up on my computer.
Now it worked for me.
Well, she
Yeah.
can't. Liz, are you having a problem? Are you not able to figure it out? In the bottom left-hand corner, there should be a little microphone button. I don't know. I
There is
can't
a
read it.
picture that appeared on my screen. The host is not allowing participants to unmute themselves. And you go to OK and then you do it. I mean, I was able to unmute. Oh, it was the hold down the space bar. No, well,
I think the host has to unmute everyone.
You're all unmuted. We can hear you.
But on the screen, it shows that people aren't muted.
Well, they have to unmute themselves, Julie. So,
And I'm just trying to be helpful.
yeah.
Liz is,
There we
Okay.
go.
Okay.
Okay.
Oh, my goodness. I don't know
Got
what
it. No,
happened.
it's okay.
Now, I do know where the unmute is.
Okay.
oh,
You might have to
Oh.
repeat
I
it
will.
because people.
First, Emily, I want to really thank you for giving us a really super, super overview. You did a wonderful job, and I know your mom is proud, and I think we all should be proud of you because you have taken the effort to really learn and go there. So much of it is shocking. I don't know that it's even necessary to talk about what's shocking. I guess my question to you is, in all of this, is there a part of your program, or did you have some sense of there was some way to do effective advocacy with the current government that we have? Because that is perhaps the most frustrating. We can certainly provide help for these people and try to help them, but really what has to happen is there has to be an uproar of people saying enough is enough. And I just wonder if there was any kind of advocacy strategy that was worked into your program or was suggested to you.
I'm just going to repeat your question and you tell me if I'm getting the gist of it so that the room here hears it. But it sounds like the question is kind of in my trips to the border, did I learn anything about how to advocate under the Trump administration, I guess, for more just immigration policy? Is that the gist?
Yeah.
Okay. So,
Essentially,
yeah.
but not only them, but the state legislatures, everybody. I mean,
Okay,
we
yeah.
need to have,
So I
a
think that
real reckoning.
we have options depending on what level we're wanting to talk to. So at the state and local level, we have the opportunity to potentially have conversations about sanctuary cities and maybe a sanctuary statehood, if that's been, I don't know if that has been even done yet. A lot of that is we have to know going in. It's important that we remember that it's kind of smoke and mirrors to a certain extent, to where we can say we're a solidarity city or a solidarity state, but at the end of the day, like, it is possible that we could have National Guard or something come in and try to enforce federal law. So we have to remember that it wouldn't be a full stop, but it could be a step at at a lower level. Allocating funding, maybe, like, could we as a state talk about, is there any money in our budget that we could set aside to funding some legal services for migrants? Because part of this problem is that there are these penalties for people trying to go through the process legally, and that shouldn't be happening. So that, I think, is what we really need to try to curtail first at whatever level, of saying, like, look, if the Trump administration is wanting to come after the criminals, then he's not supposed to be coming after the asylum seekers. So then we need to just say, why are our asylum seekers not able to seek legal asylum? Make that the question and keep pushing that
Mhm.
issue, because there is a legal pathway to asylum that's essentially just being blocked and stopped and ignored. Um, and that and that can also continue under a different administration. So that's something that we should keep an eye out for as well. Um, because he won't be here for forever.
Thank you, Emily.
Yeah,
Oh,
you're good.
okay. My name's Bill, and my issue is that well, my family were immigrants, they came from Sicily. And they came over here in terrible conditions, and they came here because it was terrible at home. But the thing that we're facing right now in the United States, in my never to be humble opinion, is that we gotta get those psychopathic sociopaths out of office. So how do we use this to influence the vote and get people out to vote? That's the issue. You know, those thugs are not gonna go away. They're not going anywhere. And they'll just keep reaching out more and more and more. That's their nature. You know, more is never enough when it comes to power. You know, if you're worried about that. So I think that our focus has to be getting these psychopaths out of the control of our government, and we have to do that through the ballot box. So how do you use this to motivate people to get up on their hind legs and vote?
Okay, so how do we use the what we're learning today to encourage more people to vote? Well, for one thing, I think as much as we can remember the human stories that even if we don't remember the names and all the details, just what is actually happening to people. If we can remember that we have veterans that are being deported, we might have some ground to stand on in conversations with people who are really serious about veterans' rights, because we can say, hey, there's this whole fraction of the pie that we're not providing their rights, that citizenship should be, like, you know, like that should be a no-brainer of an offer for service in the military. And maybe like the working family kind of is a story that a lot of Americans can resonate with. So if we can kind of talk about families who have been separated from the breadwinner, or just families who have been separated in general, talking about the economic disparity of, like, how much, if we can remember, I heard somebody in Tijuana makes $30 a day for a 10-hour workday. Like, that's a pretty low number, and that can help us remember that that's not there's not really a way for them to earn a legal livable wage and provide for their families in their home countries. They have to go elsewhere. I don't know how effective a lot of these conversations will be with people in like Washington, DC, but as far as like our neighbors, I do think that there's like some opportunity. And I think also it might like maybe we need to host a movie screening of the Ready for War documentary that talks about the deported veterans. And see if that will spark some curiosity because I do think that that's a really key topic.
And
Yeah.
Okay, we've got one online,
Sorry.
is Brian Grad.
Okay,
Go ahead.
so yeah, when I was in the Navy in the 1970s, the mid 70s, I went to boot camp and I saw companies of young Filipinos who were coming from the Philippines to serve in the Navy, and they were going to be receiving citizenship after their service. Now, I don't know if it was the special nature of the relationship that we had with the Philippine people during World War II, prior also to World War II. But I suggest that you look into that particular aspect
Yeah.
and determine, in fact, whether or not we're still doing that with any particular countries uh, gaining citizenship via service in the armed forces. Um, I just want to say that I know some people think that people who come here would be inclined to align with democratic values, inclined to vote for Democrats. I disagree, and it's not just people from Mexico, it's people from any country that don't understand our values, particularly when it comes to separation of church and state. Mexico and most of Latin America are Catholic nations. They have strong feelings relating to what the church says about how their culture should be. And I'm afraid that we may have lost ground in terms of our civil rights stature in this country because of that. And it's different. You can't ask somebody to become a citizen and then address their particular faith-based belief systems. So I'm just saying that, and I don't like the way a lot of Middle Easterners treat their women, or even Africans. They have very, very medieval outlook about how women should be treated, especially young women. And they take, in some cases, they take extreme measures against young women who are trying to attempt to integrate into our culture. Those are
Brian,
problems that could be overcome. However, I just wanted to say it was my turn. But I also feel strongly that Native Americans in this country
we can mute.
cannot be compromised to any extent by an immigration policy that we have. Thank you.
Okay. So no question. Okay,
Yeah, I don't
now,
think so.
is there a question here? Go ahead, Tim.
Thank you, Emily.
Yeah.
That was a very, very insightful and educational presentation you made. You're a natural born school teacher.
Thank you.
Well, to me, listening to what you were saying and talking about Trump and kind of following on what Bill was saying, intimidation. This is a policy of intimidation, mass intimidation. And the aimed at the immigrants, it's aimed at trying to intimidate all immigrants, whether they're citizens or not, and intimidate us too. So I'd be interested in your thoughts about how we can counter the intimidation. It seems to me that a meeting like this is exactly what we need to do to counter the intimidation.
Yeah. Yeah. How do we, knowing that the Trump administration is doing most of its motivation is coming from trying to incite fear and intimidate people who are citizens or who aren't, just kind of anybody. They're trying to maintain power that way, right? And we've seen that throughout history many times where people have used force and violence and threats to maintain power. How do we kind of combat that or work against it? I think if we remember that much of what Donald Trump is trying to do is he's trying to really create this division, this us versus them. He's defined the us and the them pretty clearly. We all know if we're part of his us or his them, if we're excluded or included in his good guy club. And he has pretty clearly put all people from the south of the United States in this like basket of just evil, everything bad. And so I think as much as we can do our best to like, I mean, not all of us are going to have the opportunity to go on trips like this. I don't know when I will get to go on a trip like this again, if ever. But we can try from home to diversify the things that we're reading, the things that we're listening to, the things that we're watching, to try to actually engage with the people that that Trump is trying to separate us from as much as possible. Because then we can actually start to dispel some of those misconceptions in our own head of that because it can be easy even for people with good hearts to start to have the lines become blurry between there is gang violence and there are cartels in Mexico, and not every Mexican is a cartel member. But it can sometimes get a little blurry when we live in the Pacific Northwest, when we're literally as far away as we possibly could be from the southern border. So I just think as much as we can try to like engage culturally, um, it will help make us just more well-rounded, and it'll like naturally make us more able to have these kinds of conversations and feel more confident about them, because it will, rather than maybe inciting this like angry response, it will just start to seem more ridiculous. We'll start to really see how ridiculous these claims are, because we know the truth and that's not the truth, and we're not going to let somebody tell us a lie.
Okay, I think Julie Johnson has her hand raised, and then we might try to wrap it up with some
Okay.
more final follow-up.
Yeah.
Julie, go ahead. I don't know if she can hear me.
I unmuted, okay.
Yay. Yeah,
okay.
we can hear you.
Well, I'm going to reinforce what Tim just said. I think you're a natural teacher. That was a very
Thank you.
good presentation. Of the 574 tribes in the United States, there's 100 in California. There's just over 100. And there's 18 or 20 tribes that are in the San Diego area. And
Wow.
I just think that when you start your presentation, I came into it a little bit late. You know, you need to remind people that the Native people owned the land first. You know, things didn't start, you know, just when the non-Indians came to America. And the Native people have a history of welcoming immigrants from the time that they first started coming to the United States. And I just want to say that, you know, if you want some contacts in California, I can talk to you later. I think you did a good job. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I would love to learn more about California. Yeah, Julie shared that can you remind me the numbers? You said 575 tribes in California and 18 to 20 in San Diego alone.
No, yeah, there's 574 federally recognized tribes in the United States. There's
Oh, 574 in the United States total.
Yes.
Recognized, federally
in
recognized.
California, there's about 100 tribes. There's about 100 tribes in Alaska.
Okay, wow.
In the San Diego area, there's I think there was like 18 tribes. There's a Sequan tribe that I've worked with, and a couple of tribes down there, really great people.
Wow.
And each one of them and of course we don't, you know, people hear a lot about the casinos, but few tribes, when you look at the 574 tribes, have casinos. But the ones that do, they're buying that property. They're trying to get back their land. and the Tono
Mhm.
tribe, and I understand, you know, we've talked about the border issues. Oh, I just wanted to say, I think you did a good job. Thank you.
Thank you.
Reiterate
Yeah,
what you said,
so,
welcoming.
Julie was sharing that she wanted to just remind us as an audience that this history didn't start when colonizers, when white settlers arrived on the land and started writing this history, that indigenous peoples have been living across all continents of the world since time immemorial, since the dawn of time, since the dawn of human life. And that there are a lot of tribal peoples in these areas that are also impacted by these issues in border communities, and that tribal peoples have this history of being welcoming to immigrants and to strangers and foreigners, which was absolutely our experience when we had the opportunity to visit the Tohono O'odham Nation. It was very welcoming, and they were so willing to just entertain our questions for hours and hours. I mean, we hung out with them for the whole day. It was lovely. But uh so yeah, thank you. Did I get all of those things? Thank you, Julie,
Yes,
for those
and
reminders.
yeah, thank you, Haishka. In my language, we say Haishka. Thank you,
Haishka.
Haishka, Haishka. Yeah.
Okay.
So,
Thank you, dear one.
Oh,
Did you want to just make a closing remark?
oh,
Was it
yeah.
something?
I guess what that really is everything that I had to share. Like I said, I will make sure that this PDF with the list of all the resources from these last few slides gets out to everybody who is here on Zoom. Maybe we'll see about just posting it on the website so that you can just find it. And then, yeah, I highly recommend you check out these movies. If anybody is maybe interested, maybe I can think about hosting a movie night or something that could be fun. But thank you all for listening.
Yeah.
Okay.